I ended the lecture with this practice for you to exercise. So if you have any questions on this is a good time to ask, and then I'll start new material. All right, I don't see any questions. Then we'll start new material immediately. So what we're doing today is the second part of the FTP lecture, which is virtual hosting. So here's the definition. Probably you have seen the definition before, but it won't hurt to review. So my way to define virtual hosting is this, is to run multiple instances of one protocol on same server. So you have one server on which you run multiple instances of one protocol, in this case FTP. So practically it means creating and running more than one FTP site on one server. And it's very common practice because people in the industry don't, whether it's FTP or websites there, they don't dedicate a server to only one site. On the same server, they are on multiple sites. Of course, it also means that usually they use a powerful server with lots of RAM, a large hard drive, good computing power, CPU, but it's less expensive, more convenient than having a separate server for every new site. So that's what we call virtual hosting, and we're looking at this now to create additional FTP sites, and then it means we'll have many FTP sites coexisting on the same server. What I'll do actually, I'll create a second site with IPv4 and then another site with IPv6. So in the end, we'll have 3 sites, the one we had yesterday, plus another one running on IPv4 and a third one running on IPv6. Is this clear definition of virtual hosting? You can apply the same definition to websites, and we'll do websites in the next module. So now what are the steps to create a new FTP site? We have the one from yesterday, but now the one from yesterday, so I just started the FTP service, and by default it does connect to the IP that you use for that site, which was specified in a configuration file. But now we're starting from scratch and creating a new site. So what are the steps to follow? Here are the 4 steps. So you have to in our sphere, planning for my new site now. So what are, again, the requirements? I need an IP address. Each site must run on its own IP address. Now we're assuming that the port number is the same for all sites. Right? For the time being, I'm assuming port number 21, which is FTP default. Is it possible to change the port number? Yes, and I'll do that also later in the lecture. But the port number cannot be used as a criterion to, specify a site, because it's an option. Usually, especially for public FTP sites, it has to be on port 21. So for the time being, we don't think of port number. It means every site must have its own IP in FTP here, okay? So IP address. So my plan is to use this IP now for my new site. Again, the IP must exist. See, if I look at my FTP server, and I have config, So yesterday I used this IP on the main IP of ETH0 for my first site. And now I'm using an alias IP here, ETH0 So you must have a properly configured IP, and then you can use it for an FTP site. Then hostname DNS. So here's what I want to use, ftp.linksdrop.com. So again, it's up to me to make sure that my plan works, that everything is consistent. Meaning, I'll make sure that in my DNS, this host name will result to this IP. So the system cannot guess it for you, cannot automatically adjust what you're doing. You plan something and you execute it while being consistent. Then directory contents. See, yesterday we explained that by default, for anonymous login we're talking about here, the directory is var FTP, right? We explained that yesterday. So that was for the first site, var FTP. So now for my new site, it has to be different directory, or else what's the point? If the two sites show the same contents, then what's the point of creating a new site, right? So my plan now is to have another directory, var FTP1, that will correspond to this site. So the first site, var FTP, the second site, var FTP1. So I have to create this directory and do whatever it takes there. And then, of course, site configuration. Now, the file we used yesterday, vsftpd.conf, applies only to the first site. The way this package is designed, vsftpd, for every other site, you have to create another file. So I'll call it vsftpd1.conf. The name could be different, but the extension has to be conf. So of course, I will not create this file from scratch. I will not type everything line by line. I'll use the first file as a template, edit it to adjust it to my new site, and save it as vsftpd1.conf. So these are the 4 steps. Let's do them, and then we'll also see how to start the site and how to get both sites running at the same time. So I'll pause here. This is important now if you have any questions on the steps and understand how to create a new site. All right. So let's start executing this step. I'll go to our virtual machine and show all the steps. It's done for me, but I'll show every configuration step. Okay. So this is my server again. The IP I just showed it. So here it is. I have config. So I'm using the first alias IP on my ETH0. So that's taken care of. If you don't have an alias IP, create one. Can you use a second adapter? Yes, it's possible. Like I do have a second adapter here. However, a second adapter would be on a different network range. And then you're going to complicate things because then a client also needs to change the IP or use a router or things like this. So it's not necessary to have a second adapter. So it's perfectly all right to have another IP as an alias IP on the same adapter in the same network range. This will make the lab easier for you. This is not a router, it's just an FTP server. So it is not required to have a second adapter. So the IP is taken care of. Next step, DNS, hostname. So I'll go to my DNS and verify that I have an appropriate host name that resolves this IP. So if I'm using linksdrop.com, I'll open a file here. Okay, I'm in etc. Sorry, I'm in the wrong directory. All right, as you can see here, I have a record for host record for the IP251, which I'm planning to use for my new site. And I have also an FTP alias for it. Here we go. FTP is an alias for skating, and skating is the host record for the IP I'm planning to use. So again, this is routine DNS configuration, but you have to take care of it. It's an automatic. So that's the host record, and this is the corresponding FTP alias. And I will check it from a client machine immediately. So I didn't change anything since yesterday. I'm pointing to the DNS server, so everything should be the same. If not, I'll troubleshoot, but I can assume everything is the same as yesterday. So NS lookup ftp.linksdrop.com. So it resolves to 251. So it means second step is always taken care of. Again, I'll pause if you have any questions here. So first step is to have an appropriate directory for this site. This is, I repeat, for anonymous login. Users who authenticate, regardless of which site it is, they log into their home directories. So when you talk about directory contents, the directory of the site, it's about anonymous access. So I want this to be now var FTP1. So for this, I go back to the server. So in the var directory, you see I've created the FTP1 subdirectory. This is not there by default. FTP is there by default, the one we used yesterday. But FTP1, it's my decision. I've created this one, and I want to use it for my new site. Now it's important to give the appropriate permissions and ownership. The defaults might be right, but check it. So if I do ls-l, you see FTP1 has the exact same settings as FTP, meaning root is the owner, and the permissions are standard directory permissions 755. So we do not change that. What we do, however, is to go into this directory FTP1 and create the subdirectory pub. So we give it again the same structure as the FTP directory var FTP that we have used yesterday. So anonymous login to this site will happen to var FTP1, and then there will be a pub directory under it where the site contents will be available. So cd pub, again, you create this directory, right? mkdir. And I put some content here, which is different from what I have in varftp, the one I used yesterday. I just copied some files here. I copied some files in this directory. So to recap here, see, we have the varftp directory, that we used yesterday. This is the default FTP anonymous login directory. Under it there is pub, and here I have the contents of my first site. This was used yesterday. And now for my new site I'm creating, I've created directory FTP1 under var, and I've given the same structure, same permission, same ownership as FTP, var FTP. And when I go into this FTP1 directory, I've created under it the pub directory as well, and I've put in some content which will be specific to this new site. So when people log into the first site, you'll experience this content here of var FTP. When you log into the second site, you'll experience this content of var FTP1. That's the plan. Are we clear? Any questions? So, last step, the configuration file. So as I said earlier, this new site will require its own configuration file that I'm calling vsftpd1.conf. So what I do for that, I go to, I am on the same server with two terminals here. So now in the vsftpd directory, here we go, I've created the file vsftpd1.conf. How did I do that? Simply by using vsftpd.conf as a template. And I've edited it and saved it as vsftpd1.conf using Control-O. So let's look at the contents. Again, everything has to be consistent. So, in this file, I have listen address 251. So that's my plan. Now the listen port, I'll come back to it later, but for now I'll disable this line. So don't worry about listen port for now. So assuming the default port 21 for FTP. Anonymous enable equal yes, nothing new here. So here is where this is a port line now for a new site. This is how I specify the directory I want to use for each site. Unknown_root var FTP1. If we don't put this line, it will revert to the same directory as the first site var FTP. And that would be useless to sites using the same directory. So this is how I'm applying my plan. I'm saying this is the anonymous login directory for this site, that is var FTP1. The rest of the configuration will be based on everything we learned yesterday, nothing different. Of course, this new site will have its own details, but all the other options we have seen yesterday will follow, and you can customize them for each site. We're going to look at it, but this section is crucial here. This is where you specify the IP of your site and the anonymous login directory. This line here, FTP username, don't worry about it for now, at least for now. I put square sign anyway, so it's disabled. So let me know if you have any questions on this section. All right, no questions? So let's quickly look at the rest of the configuration I've done here, and then we'll experience logging into these sites. So for the rest, see again, I have write enable equal yes. I have enabled anonymous uploads here equal yes. So nothing new. See the directory messages, everything we have seen yesterday. You can also customize them for this site. And yeah, we'll see now logging in, but also the banner message. You see I put here a different banner message than the first site. So we'll experience it as well. It can have its own JLink configuration, everything, okay? So let's see now. I like to users to be able to connect to both sites. This site should coexist. So what do I do next? Now here again, there's something new to learn, because now I have to find a way to start both sites and let them run without conflicts. So as it is now, my FTP service should be running. Actually, did I save this? I'll save this file. I made a change where I disabled one line. Right. So system control status, VSFTPD. So the service is running. Now, if I go on a client machine as it is, and I connect to yesterday's site, which should work, I haven't changed anything. This is the site I used yesterday. So it's still working, you know. See, this is the banner message of the first site, anonymous. And this is yesterday's site. And these are the contents. Now, what about the new site? The second site I just described. If I attempt to connect to it, let's see what's going to happen. So it's supposed to be ftp.linkzerp.com. It says connection refused. Why? Because this site is not running yet. The first site is running, but not the second site. So just having, even if let's say I restart the service here. Let's say I do system control, just to see that will fix it, okay? System control restart, yes, FTPD. Back to the client. It says connection refused, but the first site should still be working. No problem there. So by the way, I don't have to log in every time to show the site is working. You see, I get its response, so I'll do Control-C to stop it. Okay, so the second site is not running yet, and that's normal. When you have virtual hosting, you cannot simply get all of them to run simply by restarting your VSFTPD service. What we need to do here is to type a command to start or restart each site by itself. And I'll show immediately how. I have the lecture notes there. Now, when I say system script, it doesn't mean that you have to create a script. That's why I call it system script. It's already there. There's a script in USRS bin called VSFTPD, which will help for this task now to start each site by itself. So what you need to do is this. You simply, I'll show immediately the command. So keep in mind it's USRS bin, and that's where the script is. I'll show it actually. I'll show the script where it is. So I'll go to USRS bin. There are lots of files there. Here we go, you see VSFTPD. It's green, it's a script. And I repeat, I have not created this file myself. The script is there. It is part of the package of VSFTPD. But this is the script that we need to run to start or restart a site when we have virtual hosting, when you have multiple sites running at the same time. So the way to do it is the following. So I'll go back to my VSFTPD directory, although not necessary, but to make things easier to grasp, I'll go back to my VSFTPD directory, etc, sorry. So etc VSFTPD. All right, I'm mistyping things this morning. cd etc VSFTPD. So what I want now is to start the site corresponding to vsftpd1.conf. So the script is in USRS bin. The script name is vsftpd. And I'll type the name of the configuration file here, vsftpd1.conf. This is how you start a site when you have virtual hosting. Okay? And now let's see if it will work. I'll go back to the client machine. I'll take note of the command first. I'll pause a few seconds here. You can run this from a different directory as well. The complete command would be by adding here /etc/vsftpd/vsftpd1.conf. So you type the whole path, and you can run it from anywhere. So with this, back to the client machine, and I'll try to connect to the second site again. So now it works, and you see the banner message of the new site. It's different from the first site. First site is fruits. This one has a different banner message. And when I log in anonymously, I'll do cd pub and ls. So these are the files in varftp1 I'm using for my second site. It's exactly as expected. So now both sites are running. That's exactly what we call virtual hosting. So any questions here? So if I go back to my first site, it will be different content. This is my first site. You see the banner is also different. And when I log in, cdpub, this is the first site, different contents. So now, what if I make a change to my configuration and I want to restart any of my sites? Let's look at that. So if I want to restart my site, let's say we'll do it eventually. Let's say I'll do configuration change to my second site and I want to restart it. How do I do it? So for that, you cannot simply run the script again. First, you have to stop it. I'm not saying stop the VSFTPD service. I want to stop only this site and then start it again. So what you do for that on a server, you type ps-aux. This shows, I'm not sure if you have done this command earlier in the semester. So this command ps-aux will give you a list of every process or service presently running on this server. And here, oops, I misclicked. I will make this larger. Right. I'll type it again because we need to see the last part here. All right. So you see, this is what I did earlier. USRS pin, VSFTPD1. I'll run it again. Here we go. This is what I executed earlier, a few minutes ago, to start the site. And here on the left, you see the ID number. This is the process ID, which is 5337. 53337. So to stop it, use the kill command. You type kill with the process ID, and it stops the site. It's a bit like Task Manager in Windows, where you can forcefully stop a task from running. You identify your task, you see the process ID, and use the kill command to terminate it. So at this point, going back to the client, if I try to connect to the second site again, you see it no longer works because it's been stopped. But this does not affect the first site. Still working. See, things are on a per site basis now. And now I can start it again. So I'll run again the command with the script there. Here we go. This will start the site again. And the client should be able to connect again. Here we go. So I hope you see how it works. You took notes. If you have any questions there. So this is you run the script with the configuration file name to start the site. If you want to restart it, first you do ps-aux. Here is the command. And you see the process ID, PID here. So you run ps-aux. You identify the task you're interested in this case, the command to run the second site, which is here. You identify the corresponding process ID. You terminate it, you stop it with the kill command. It stops the site. And then you want to start again, you just run the script again. And the same thing will apply to the first site. Now that we have two sites running, also the first site cannot just like that restart by typing system control vsftpd. For the first site, you do the same process. You make a configuration change for a first site, then you go with the exactly same process to restart it for the first site, meaning it will be vsftpd.conf. So any questions on this? All right, there's a question repeat from USR bin. I'll show again the command there. It's USR bin, right? USR bin is the directory where you have the script vsftpd. This is a system script. It's in USR bin. So you just run the script followed by the name of the configuration file that corresponds to your site. This, of course, I'm in the vsftpd directory. If I were anywhere else, let's say I'm somewhere else, let's say I'm in the etc directory, and I want to start the site. So I would type the complete command. It will be usr sbin vsftpd. Then the path is etc vsftpd vsftpd1.conf. So this would work from anywhere. But since I were doing it from the vsftpd directory itself, I did not need to type the path here. But this is general command. You can even put this in a script so that from within a script you can start a site. All right, so now I have my two sites running. So here you see again how to restart a site, ps-ex, kill followed by the ID, and run the script again. So now we can start looking at some options to configure the second site. The basic work has been done. The site is up and running. So now specifying a port number. This is an option. A site may be assigned a port number other than the default of FTP, which is 21. That's not usually done because if you want to use a site for public access, it is supposed to have port 21. Otherwise, how can people find out and connect to your site? But in some case where you want to use a site for a more specific purpose, like only a group of employees will access it, for example, and you tell them the port number, then it could have a different port number. So let's learn a technique, how to change the port number of a site. So for the second site, I'll use different port number now. I'm on the server here, and I'll go back to the configuration of the new site. And it's very simple to change the port number. I have the line here already, but I disabled it earlier. So you put the line listen_port, and you put the port number of your choice. So I'll just remove the square sign here to enable the line. Now 2400 is an example, but as a general rule, what's recommended is that you never use port numbers which are less than 1024. Why? Because port numbers which are less than 1024 are reserved to well-known standard protocols. You see, just look at the port numbers that you know: FTP 21, DNS 53, Telnet 23, SSH 22, etc. So all these are numbers less than 1024. So if you use such a number, you're at high risk of creating a conflict with another important protocol which may be running on your machine. So that's why it's always recommended to go above 1024 when you specify your own port numbers. And you have plenty of room, because port numbers can go as high as 65,535. So there's no reason to, use that red zone of port numbers under 1024. So that's all. So now this site, if I restart my site, it will be running on port 2400. So again, now another chance to see how to restart the site. I made a change. I'll save it. I'll need to restart this site, right? So Control O to save it. I don't need to exit the file now. I'll go to the R terminal. Okay, this was already running. All right. So now what I'll do then is first ps-aux again. Need to make this bigger again. So this is the last time I did it. See, USRSP VSFT, here is the command. And now the process ID, see, the process ID is dynamic. So every time you have to check what's the new number for it. So it is 53521. So I'll kill it. And I'll just start it again by typing USRSPin VSFTPD, the script, and the name of my configuration file. Since I am in VSFTP right now, no need to type the path. I'll just type the file name, vsftpd1.conf. Now this has just started the site again with the port number activated. So you see it here. Next, I'll go to client machine and try it. But any questions here? So I'll go to client machine. And if I try to connect to the set again now as it is, see, connection refused. See, just 2 minutes ago it was connecting. Right now it says connection refused. No surprise, because the port number has changed. So what's going on, if you just type this command as it is, FTP followed by the site name, it automatically assumes port 21, which is the default of FTP. But now it's no longer the case. It's 2400. So for me to be able to connect, I will need to specify, I will need to know and to specify the port number. How do I do it? On the Linux client, it's pretty straightforward. You can just type the command space the port number 2400 when Numlock cooperates, of course. All right. And now it connects, just as before. All right. Now, how does it work from a Windows client? It's slightly different there. You see, first I'll show that without specifying the port number, it doesn't work. I don't know why it says unknown host number. Well, maybe DNS is not, let me see, I'll do NS lookup first, but it should not say unknown host. So if I do NS lookup, all right, it's pointing wrong DNS. I thought I fixed this. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yesterday, I used the Windows client only by IP. That's why. So it's pointing wrong DNS server. I'll fix that. So it works now for NS lookup. So as it is now when I do the FTP command, see, connection refused because it's SMIC port 21. And now, if I just do the same thing as I did in Linux there, if I put space the port number, it doesn't work right away here in the Windows. So what you need to do is the following. You first type FTP, you press enter, and then from within the FTP prompt here, you type open the site, so ftp.linksdrop.com, and here's where you can put space the port number. Or cd pub, I type in. So this is the contents. And one more step for this, then I'll see if you have any questions. What about connecting with a browser for a different port number? So if I do it with Firefox here, and it's the same for any browsers actually. So I'll first connect to yesterday's site. Which is ftp3.soccer.net. So this is yesterday's site. And now for the new site, it's ftp.linksdrop.com. And the port number in the browser, just put, you don't put a space, you put colon, the port number. This is universal for browsers. So you put colon followed by the port number, no spaces. This is the second site. When you don't put a port number, whether you're at the command prompt or in the browser, port 21 will be assumed by default. And remember, the port number is an option. You don't have to do it. See, earlier I connected to my second site with port 21, right? I'm just teaching here how to use different port number. But don't end up thinking that you must have a different port number for a second site. I can at any time revert back to port 21. So any questions at this point on using a different port number? Actually, I will go back to port 21 because I don't want confusion. I don't want, because I've seen that before. Some students end up thinking that, every site must have a different port number. Not at all. So I'll change this back to port 21 now. So back to the configuration file. I'll disable the line for a port number. Save it. And restart the site again, and have a chance to see how to do it. So ps-aux. So latest process ID here for VSFTPD1 is 53921. And I'll start it again with a script. So it should be back to port 21. See, here I'll do it with the command prompt. See, now 2400 should not work. Oops. I'm on Windows, sorry. So if I try port 2400 again, open is what I did earlier. All right, still working. So let's see, the sounding didn't update properly here. Unless it's cached, but I don't think so, so we'll find out. So let's see, I'll just do Control-C to stop it. So let me see, is it the same thing from the Linux client as well? Let's see if so if I try again from here, yeah, it's still working. So it did not update properly. So let me see what happened there. So I did put a square sign for listen port. I'll save it again. ps-aux. Here's vsftp1.conf. Now I see 53978. I'll start it again. Yeah, still running here. Something strange. Because it's not updating the new information there. All right, let's clear the screen here. Let's go back to the configuration file. Listen port is now disabled. Exit this, come back, see if it's set properly. Yeah, listen port is disabled. I'll do it from scratch. I'll first restart the VSFTPD service. And I'll check again. So I see 53767 as the ID number. I'm starting the site again now. And finally, see, now it kicked in. So now port 21 should work. So if I don't put a port number at all, it connects now, okay? So this is what we call troubleshooting, guys. In this field, you have to be, actually pragmatic or do what it takes to see. For whatever reason, it got stuck there, and I needed to do it from scratch. I restarted, completed the VSFTP service, and then again I did ps-auxi and started again. It ended up working. So that's exactly what, see, that's why we do lots of lab work and so on, because to become a good technician, you have to be used to this kind of situation there. When something doesn't cooperate right away, find a way, do more steps, stop, start, go back to the basics, start a complete service. See, the more lab work you do, the more you troubleshoot, the more you get used to this kind of thinking. It's exactly what we're trying to develop here. In the end, this is what makes a good technician. When you're working at the enterprise level there, what's needed there is someone who will fix problems, will find a way to get that thing to run, to fix the server, to reconfigure and get it to work. So if you just get stuck on something and say, I don't see why it doesn't work, something wrong and so on, and get nervous, that doesn't help. You have to find a way to get it to work. All right, any questions on this last part? So now it's back to port 21. Of course, the browser too should now be the same thing. If I go back to Firefox on the client, and at the same time, there's the opportunity to teach something about using the browser. See, browsers have their own cache. So you see, I did something that I changed the configuration. Now I'm going to try to see the change. So a few minutes ago, it was on port 2400. Now it's back to port 21. Now the browser may have cached this FTP page. So to make sure that I will get the new setup to be displayed, I will clear the cache of this browser. How do I clear the cache? Every browser has a way to clear its cache. So in the case of Firefox, you go to the settings, you go to preferences, and then advanced, so settings, preferences, advanced, and then network. You see here's where it says cached web content. You can click on clear now to clear it manually, but this will have to do it every time. But for longer term, if you really want to clear the cache on a regular basis, you can click on override automatic cache management here. And if you put this to 0, then it will not cache anything because I'm not providing any room for caching. All right, so I'll show you once again: settings, preferences, network, first advanced and then network, and then that's where you see the cache management. You can clear manually at any time, or you can set it to 0 to prevent future caching. If using a different browser, every browser has a way of doing it. Just go to settings and find out how to clear the cache. So now, if I connect with FTP site again, see, port 2400 should no longer work. It does not. If I remove the port number, meaning port 21 is a default, then it connects to the site. Questions? So we have seen how to create a second site, test it, and also we have learned how to change the port number. We'll see more options next. All right, so we can do a little bit more before break time. And the next thing I have is controlling user access. We have seen this yesterday, right? So at the same time, let's review yesterday's work, but they will apply it to the new site as well. In other words, to decide who can log in or not to this site. Now, what did we learn yesterday? Let's go back there on the server. In this directory vsftpd, we have the file user underscore list that we used yesterday, right? We have learned that by default, whoever is in this list will not be allowed to log into the FTP. But now we have two sites. And I would like each site to have its own user list. Okay, I don't want, see, if one user is not allowed to log into the first site, maybe I want that user to log into the second site. So for maximum options and flexibility, I like to have a separate user list for each site. That's exactly why I've created a second file here, user1 underscore list. And I want this one to apply to my second site. So as it is now, if I check the first file, so to demonstrate, let's say, so this applies to the first site, the one we did yesterday. I'll enable the line for user 600, meaning user 600 will not be allowed to log into this site. Now for my second site, which user did I use yesterday? Let me, I created a new user, right? Was it 711? etc password. Yeah, user 711 is the one I created and used yesterday. So now for my second site, then I'll be using user1_list. And here I'll put user711. You see two separate lists. For the first site, I'm saying user 600 will not be allowed to log in. For the second site, I'm saying user 711 will not be allowed to log in. Of course, you can have a longer list of users if needed. But before we can try this, I need to add this to the configuration. I need to tell the system that for a second site, I want to use this file. Okay, so let's see how to do that. So here's my configuration file. Yeah, I'll open it here actually. So here it is. So in this section, lock enable equal yes, user list underscore deny equal yes, as we have seen yesterday. And now you add these two lines. User list underscore enable equal yes, meaning I will specify the file I want to use for this. And I've added the info here. User list underscore file, and I want to use the user1 underscore list file for this site. If you don't put these lines, by default, it uses user underscore list. So take note of the syntax, and I'll also show you yesterday's sites. I mean the corresponding lines for the site, the first site I used yesterday, so you can compare. So this way the system knows that this is the file to check to see who can or cannot log into this site. All right, so I did not change anything here, nothing to save. I just showed you the configuration I have. But before I try it, let's review what we have in the first site in this section. So for the first site, bsftp.conf. See, all I have is the two lines there and nothing about the path. But that's why, by default, it assumes user underscore list. If you want a different file, like for my second site, then you add those lines. So now we can try it. So for the first site, ftp3.soccer.net. If I try user 600, it says permission denied. Why is this again? Let's at the same time show what we have on a server to make sure everybody gets this clearly. So because in the user underscore list file, user 600 is there, and therefore this file applies to the first site, and therefore user 600 cannot log in. Now if I try user 711 for the same site, no problem, I can log in because this user is not in the deny file. So that's the first site. Now, for a second site. For a second site, according to my configuration, it will check the other file, which is user1 underscore list. And I put there user 711 only. So for a second site, if I try user 711, it doesn't let me in. User 711 can log into the first site, but not to the second site. However, if I try user 600, which was denied access to the first site, here I can log in, no problem, because user 600 is not in the deny file that applies to the second site. So you see, it's very nicely designed. Each site now has its own allow and deny file. Another chance to ask questions. I'll pause it a little bit here. Okay. So we covered controlling user access. Then I have jailing as well. Wonder if it's a good idea to do this before or after the break, because I also show how to do separate jailing for each site. And it might be a better idea to do it after the break there. So again, do you have any questions on what we did so far this morning? Creating a new site, how to start it, change the port number, or controlling user access. So once you have your second site running, you can configure it really separately from the first site. It's all the same configuration items as we had yesterday. You can customize for your second site. So anything not clear this one, anything you'd like to revisit from virtual hosting on? All right, what I'll do actually before we take a break, I'll remind you of schedule. I don't want anybody to get confused about this. That's why I've already opened the file, or did I? Maybe I close it here, okay. I'll open it, no, I have it here, okay. So here's again a schedule of the current semester. And we are present during the second module here, TBH. That started on May 29th. Now, it ends on July 11th. This is now week number 4, right? But there's only one weekend left, which is the exam weekend. But that's on July 11th, which is 3 weeks from now. Why? Because the next 2 weeks are holidays. It's clearly indicated here. June 26th, 27th, and July 3 and 4th are holidays. These are the Quebec and Canada holidays. All right? So the whole school will be closed during those weekends. So please be aware of that. That next 2 weeks we have no class, and then following that, on July 10th, which is Saturday, we'll have the review day, and July 11th will be the exam day. Any questions on that? All right. Just before I take a break, also something very simple to remind you when it comes to connecting to a site. See, this morning I've been doing all my connections by host name, right? But it also works by IP. Let's not forget about that. So at any time, you may connect to a site by its IP, especially when you're troubleshooting. So now I have my 2 sites running on 2 different IPs. So if I go by IP there, for my first site, the IP is 250. That's the first site with banner fruits. And for my second site, the IP is 251 with a different banner. And of course, different contents. So this is something not to forget about, because if you can't connect by host name at any time, the next thing to try is by IP. If it works by IP, then you know that your FTP site is working. So whenever it works by IP but not by host name, then it will be pretty clear that DNS would be, is the problem. But if it doesn't work by IP neither, so it's a more serious problem. It's not DNS, or it's not only DNS. It's something more basic with the FTP site itself. All right, if there are no questions at this point, we can take our break now. 15 minutes as usual, so I'll be back at 5 minutes past 10. All right? I'll put a post there. After the break, we'll do JLink for a second site, and after that, we'll also create a third site, and that one will be running on IP version 6. All right, we're back. The lecture will continue in a few seconds. Okay, so the next thing we're doing is JLink for the second site. Again, it's based on the same ideas as we did yesterday for the first site. And I like each site to have its own JLink configuration. So depending on which site we're talking about, a given user may or may not be jailed in that site. So if I look again at the configuration of my second site, exit this, and here's, oops, I'll open configuration file here. Now let's review first what we did yesterday, and then I'll show. This is the file of the first site configuration file. So for JLink, we have seen yesterday this section. It specifies whether users are jailed or not in general, yes or no here. And then it provides an exception list based on its default file, chroot_list. That's yesterday's site. And now something similar will be done for the new site. So I'll open the corresponding file. And here it is. In fact, the only difference is the file name. So here I'm specifying an error file, which is chroot1_list. So again, the idea is to do two separate exception lists for JLink. One that applies to the first site, and another file that applies to the second site. Otherwise, it's the exact same configuration items to jail users or not. So I don't have anything new to explain there. It was covered in detail yesterday. If you have any questions, I will answer. But it's really the same thing with a different exception file. And I'll do, of course, an example to demonstrate it. You have to create this file, in my example, chroot1_list. And based on this line here, it will apply to the second site. We're okay with the idea? So let's see, what do I have in this file now, and also for the file of the first site. So when I do ls here, I see both files. Just use nano to create them. So yesterday we have created chroot_list, and now I have here chroot1_list for my new site. So yesterday's file, let's check it first. So this one is saying both users will be jailed. So let me change this. I want, let's say, for the first site, I want user 600 to be jailed, but user 711 no. So I'm going to remove 711. In fact, it was whoever is in this file as it is now, whoever is in this file will not be jailed. I'll show you again a configuration, right? As it is now in my configuration, whoever is in the file in the exception list will not be jailed. So as it is now then, user 600 will not be jailed for the first site. everybody else will be jailed. And for my second site, I'll do the opposite. I'll put user 711 here. 711 will not be jailed. Everybody else will be jailed. Also, I'll make sure at this point that both users can access the sites. So I'll review the access files. So I'll let user 600 access the first site by putting square sign here. So I'm not restricting access at this point. I'm only controlling jailing. So likewise for my second site, I'll let user 711 access it. So let me recap before demonstrating it. So what the configuration files are saying right now, for the second site, this is for the second site. See, when the first line is yes, it means users in general will be jailed. Yes means yes, jail them. But then whoever is in the exception list will not be jailed. So who's in the exception list of the second site? That's chroot1_list. That's user 711. So this user should not be jailed for the second site. For the first site, is a similar configuration. So I have yes again on the first line, meaning in general users will be jailed, except for those who are in the first site's exception list. And the exception list for the first site has only user 600. So this user will not be jailed for this site. And now I'll demonstrate it. Remember, you don't have to restart the sites when you edit these files. You restart the sites only when you edit the configuration file. So I'll go to the client machine. So I'll start with the first site, my host name. If I try user 600, and I do pwd, I'm not jailed because this is the exception user for each site. If I try the same user for a second site, pwd, I'm jailed. You see, user 600 is clearly jailed in the second site, but is not jailed in the first site. Now let's try user 711. First site, user 711. Jailed. Second site, user 711. Not jailed. You see, once you understand how it works, it's very straightforward. How is this done? Simply by controlling those exception lists for every site. See, my two exception lists are chroot_list for a first site and chroot1_list for a second site. Each one contains a different list of users. And you simply specify which file you want to use in the configuration file. So for the first site, I'm saying use this exception list. And for the second site, the other exception list. Any questions on this part? Control-J link for each site. In the lecture notes, I have a few points as well here. Yeah, here it is. I mean, separate list for each file, for each site. Just the main idea here. All right, there's one thing left, which is to create the third site, and it's running IPv6. So we'll look at these two. And then there's another practice I'll give you there for lab time, and that will be it. So no questions for now? Now, before we actually do the IPv6 site, there's something important that it's time for me to show it. I did not show this, what I'm about to show it now. I did not show it yesterday because it was not necessary when you have only one site. But the moment you have two sites or more, now what I'm about to show becomes really important. So let me start actually with my first site configuration file. So this is the original vsftpd.conf. So now you go towards the end of the file. And you have two important lines here. There's one that says listen equal yes, and then you have listen underscore IPv6 equal no. So again, please check this carefully because some students forget about it or don't realize it, and then they spend hours trying to figure out why virtual hosting is not working. So whenever you have two or many sites, meaning virtual hosting on the same server, you have to make sure these two lines are correct. For every IPv4 site, you must have this. Listen equal yes means listen to IPv4 addresses. Then the other one obviously means IPv6 addresses. And the idea is that for a given site, you cannot have both enabled. It's one or the other, and it must be the correct choice. So if you're using IPv4 for your site, you must have listen equal yes and listen IPv6 equal no. So do not take this for granted. Check it. By default, it might be the other way around. Okay? I repeat, I did not mention this yesterday because when you have only one site, it is not an issue. But now that we have two and soon three sites, it will be an issue. So I repeat once again, for any IPv4 sites, make sure you have exactly what I'm showing here. Listen equal yes, listen IPv6 equal no. This is my first site. Let me show you my second site as well. Exact same thing, because both sites are using IPv4. Now I'm about to show an IPv6 site, which will have it the other way around, obviously. Any question on this? All right, so now we'll look at the steps to create IPv6 site, which is really the same as IPv4. Nothing really new except the version of the IP and this detail here. So lecture notes first. Actually, I don't have it here. Maybe it's afterwards, or maybe it was earlier in the part. All right, I don't have the details. Anyways, similar. I just write here, create an IPv6 site, and please follow the steps. So creating an IPv6 site. So the basic steps will be the same as earlier. See, if you go back to the 4 steps there, IP address, host name, directory content, and site configuration. Same things, just that it's using IPv6. So first, let's see the IPv6 configuration. You need IPv6 on a server. So I'll do ifconfig. And the IPv6 I'm using is 188.0 A6::31. I have also a diagram here. Here we go. So the IP is A6::31. I'll put the same sectionary lecture notes for IPv6. Sorry. So the IP will be A6::31. And I'll also change the information. So I'll check now what's the host name I'm using, what directory I will use, and so on. And I'll use the file vsftpd6.conf. It doesn't have to be called like this, but just to make it clear that easily identified as a version 6, I'm calling it vsftpd6.conf. So let's look at the host name. I'll go to my DNS. Here I have in the linksdorp.conf file actually named I have A6::31 as a version 6 host record. So I'm doing a bit of review on creating a version 6 record here. It's an AAAA record. And the corresponding alias name I've created here is FTP6. So ftp6.linksdorp.com should resolve to this version 6 IP. So the host name I'm planning to use is, let's write it there, ftp6.linksdorp.com. I'll check right away from a client machine I can NS look up this. Now remember, on Linux, although it works, but it's not convincing because I don't see the IP. So I prefer not to use nslookup for IPv6. I'd rather use the host command. You can also find nslookup options to display better, but host is very straightforward. So host ftp6.linksdorf.com. There we go. It tells me very clearly that this is the IP. Back to the server. Now I need a directory for this site as well. So on the FTP server here. /var, I've created another directory named FTP6. Again, for convenience, I call it 6 to easily relate to IPv6. The same permission and ownership. FTP6 root is the owner and 755 has permissions. And when I go into it, I've created there a directory pub. So same structure. And I'll put specific to this site. I'll just create a new file so that we can see clearly that when I connect to it, this is the site. So I'll just create a file called hello. So when I connect to this site in a few minutes there, I should see these 5 files. And of course, the configuration file, vsfp6.conf. Did I write the path there? All right, so the directory I'm using is var ftp6. So using any of the existing configuration files there I've created, using as a template any existing configuration files, I've created vsftpd6.conf. So it's really similar to what we have seen before, but with some details related to IPv6. So first important line, listen address. Now you see the syntax here. It's listen address 6. You have to add the 6 there, and the IP I'm using. Port number is optional, so I have disabled the line. And then unknown_root, it's var ftp6, the directory I've just showed there for this site. So I'll wait again a few seconds if you're taking notes. And the rest is, just like for the first 2 sites, you may customize anything you want in terms of permissions, uploading, directory messages, everything we have learned. See again, the file to allow or disallow people to log in. It's all the same stuff. Jailing, nothing different. The banner is site using IPv6. The only thing in the end is to take care of those 2 lines. So now you see for this one, I have listen equal no and listen IPv6 equal yes. This is crucial because for every site, for IPv4, as we have seen, it's the other way around, is now IPv6. So no for listen and yes for listen IPv6. So before I try any questions on how to configure this v6 site? You start or restart the site the same way as we did for the previous one. So now it shouldn't be running. I haven't started this site yet. So to start it, I will do the same technique, meaning I'll run the script. See, before I start, if I try to connect to it, let's see the message and then we'll see the difference. So I'll go to client machine. First, I have to make sure also the client communicates with the server in IPv6. So I'll do IP6 tables -F on both machines to make sure the firewall doesn't block anything. Maybe I've done it earlier, but I'm not sure, so I'm not doing it again. So the client also needs an IPv6. Some students tend to forget about this. It has happened many times to me in lab that students call me to say, how come I cannot connect to my server for IPv6? I did everything right. And then again, back to the basics. The student never realized that the client did not have an IPv6 or not in the same range as the server. Then how do you expect to communicate? Okay, the basics, I mean. So if I do ifconfig here on the client machine, I do have it. You see A6::40. It is in the same range as the server. So I should be able to ping it. Ping 6, A6::31, the server's IP. So the basics are checked. It's under control. So now I did not start the IPv6 site yet. If I do FTP, ftp6.linkzerf.com, connection refused, no surprise, because the site is not running. So I'll go and start the site. How again with the script, usrsbin vsftpd. And since I'm already in the vsftpd directory, I'll just put the name of the configuration file, vsftpd6.conf. So if I try again now on the client machine, so now I can connect to this to the banner site using IPv6. And these are the files I added, including the one I just created a few minutes ago. Hello. Of course, the other sites are still running. There's no conflict or interference there. So if I do ftp.link0.com, which is the IPv4 site. That's the other site I have there. All right. And also my very first site, which is ftp3.soccer.net. So that's my first site. So all three sites are running right now with different contents. And for the IPv6 site as well, I'm not going to repeat everything now, but you may customize everything the same way. It can have its own user_list file, its own JLink file, its own configuration of uploads, downloads, etc. So it's done the same way as the others, independent site. Everything that we learned yesterday can be applied to any of the sites. Questions on IPv6? Now, one interesting detail is the following to be aware of. If I connect by IP instead of hostname, if I want to, let's say, if I'm troubleshooting or checking things, and I like to connect to an IPv6 site by IP. So you see that's compared to IPv4. If I connect the IPv4 site by IP, I just have the IP, right? Such as for my second site, 251. So that's a connection by IP. But now, what if I want to do the same thing for the IPv6 site? So the IP is A6::31. Now, here at the command prompt, it works. You see, I just have the IP the same as the IPv4, and I can log in. But now let's try this using a browser. I'll try with IPv4 just to see a difference there. So that's the IPv4 site, one of the IPv4 sites. Now if I try type the IP of the v6 site, A6::31. Here it doesn't work because the browser doesn't understand right away an IPv6 like this. Now it thinks that this is a host name because it starts with A, right? So a browser is not designed to right away understand that you're typing an IPv6. So to get this to work, what you do, very simple. The convention is to put the IPv6 in square brackets. That's the way it's designed for a web browser. So FTP, square brackets, and then you type the IPv6 inside. So this way the browser will say, oh, hi, you mean an IPv6 because in square brackets. And now even this is not cooperating here. I'll see what's the problem because normally it should work. All right, let's check things. Again, if I check it from the command prompt. Oh, sorry, I am on a server here. I'm just in the wrong machine, sorry. Am I? I think so. All right, where is the client machine? Yeah, I'm another. All right, so let me see what went wrong here. So I'll close this and I'll try again from the command prompt. So V6 that is working. It's not, the browser is not cooperating right now. So we'll check again. So nothing wrong with the IPv6, it's working perfectly. So let's see what's wrong with the browser. First, I'll check it by host name. So it's ftp6.linkzorp.com. This works. All right. And if I check by IP, square brackets and IPv6. Works now. So earlier it was, I don't know, it was stuck, it was caching, or maybe something was cached. But that's the way to do it, right? You put square brackets if you want to connect by IP using a browser. So you put square brackets there, and then you type the IP inside the brackets. We're okay with this? Any questions? It's true for any browsers, not only Firefox. All right, I'm basically done with the material here. I have another practice that put there in the file. I'll quickly go over it. And again, I'll give you a chance to ask questions. So that practice is part 2 now. So it's based on today's material, obviously, virtual hosting. So I have 2 sites. I'm just calling them site 1 and site 2, just as a reference. So requirements, different banner message for each site, different contents for each site, meaning a different directory, obviously, for each site having a different set of files. The first site will allow anonymous login. The second site will not allow anonymous login. And the first site will not allow anonymous uploads. Yesterday we practiced how to allow anonymous uploads. So for this one I'm saying, do not allow anonymous uploads for the site. Then have 3 users, user 1, user 2, and user 3, with the following requirements. For the first site, user 1 will be allowed to log in but not jailed. User 2 will be allowed to log in and will be jailed. And user 3 will not be allowed to log in. For a second site, user 1 not allowed to log in, user 2 allowed to log in, not jailed, and user 3 allowed to log in and will be jailed. This is very good practice related to today's material. And I haven't specified its practice whether it's IPv4 or IPv6. It could be either. One of the sites could be using IPv4, the other could be using IPv6, or both sites may be using the same version of IP. It doesn't change anything for requirements. But make sure you do practice how to create both IPv4 and IPv6 sites. I mean, this practice is not the only thing you need to know. It's just one way to encourage you to practice. But whatever we covered today and yesterday, you have to know it and practice it. So time again to see if you have any questions on any parts of FTP we have covered. And also this finishes the material for the module overall. Actually, we have done a lot. If you go back to the beginning of the module until up to this point, we have done many different protocols and services and many labs. And we'll meet again in 3 weeks. July 10th, let's check the date again. So July 10th is a Saturday in 3 weeks. And that's when we will have the review day. And the following day, Sunday, the 11th of July, we'll have the exam. So this afternoon will be an excellent time for you to practice FTP. And I hope you did already yesterday's practice, so you have the new practice today. And even if you have time, also start reviewing all of the course material. Because I'm telling you, when you come back in 3 weeks, there will be only 1 day for review. Repeat chroot. Chroot probe. I'm guessing you mean the J-Link. Here's my FTP server. So in the VSFTP directory, here's the file chroot_list, and I have also chroot1_list. So it's quite clear that this is your question about. And these are the files used as exceptions for J-Link. So if I look, for example, at yesterday's site, first site, that's vsftpd.conf. So this is a section that deals with J-Link here. And the first line specifies whether the user will be jailed in general or not. So when you have yes here, I put yes in this example, it means users in general will be jailed. Yes means yes, jail them. But then by providing the next lines here, you provide an exception list, meaning whoever is listed in that chroot_list file will be the exception to the general rule. So whoever is in the file will behave opposite to what this line says. So if this line says yes, jail them, it means whoever in this file will not be jailed. If the line was no here, if instead of yes you put no here, then users in general will not be jailed. But then whoever is in the file here will be jailed. It's always the opposite. So that's the exception list. So as it is, in my chroot_list file, I have user 600. So this user is the only exception right now. You can have more users if you wish. You can, on every new line, you put another user account. So user 600 is the exception. So it means as it is now, for the first site, everybody will be jailed except user 600. For my second site, I have something similar. This is the second site's configuration file. So again, in the example, I have yes for the first time, meaning user in general will be jailed. And my exception file is chroot1_list. So this way, each site has its own control over who will be jailed or not. And for chroot1_list, I put user 711 there. So this user will be the exception for the second site. He'll be the only one who will not be jailed. Everybody else will be jailed for the second site. The same logic. Each site has its own jailing list, exception list. This one for the first site, and this one for the second site. You may create the same thing for the IPv6 site. You may create a file, let's say chroot6_list, and apply the same logic there. Any other questions? Feel free to ask. We have time because I finished the material here. Now, in the next 2 weekends, I cannot guarantee, but normally, I mean, the way things have happened previously, when there's a holiday weekend there, I think I still have remote access. RDP, normally they don't shut down the RDP, but there will be nobody around to help you troubleshoot. I mean, the IT team will also be on holiday. So in principle, you should be able to use RDP in those holiday weekends, but if anything goes wrong, nobody will be able to help you. You can send an email to IT, they will not answer. So don't count on it. That's why practice as much as you can today, and then we have the review day on July 10th. All right, so let's see, there's a question at smb.conf. So what's the question? I don't mind, I can answer a question on Samba as well. So just please specify what's the problem. I can open my file, maybe you can tell me what's your question more specifically. In fact, this is also I use this one for my Samba discussion as well. And probably your question is about the sharing section there. Here I have examples of sharing a folder, sharing a printer. So can you be more specific about your question? So compare, I mean, if it says working, most probably it's a syntax error. Can you start your service? Does the service start? When you do system control start SMB, or eventually restart, does that work? So you cannot restart the service, then it's most probably a syntax error. So compared to my syntax here, if you can start the service but you cannot connect to the share, it must be a logical error somewhere, maybe wrong path, something like that. No, okay, where to add? No, add this to the end. It's not global settings. I'm at the very end of the file, which is the share definitions. This section is referred to as share definitions. Here we go. And that's where I've added at the end my shares here. It's not part of global settings. Global settings, things which are like general settings of how Samba works. But your shares, you add them at the end of the file. See, when you say, can you repeat what scan Samba? I cannot repeat the lecture. See, I just needed to be more specific and ask questions. Because you spend lots of, it's be like repeating a complete lecture on Samba. That's we don't even have time for it now. But I'm here to, I don't mind answering questions, but please be specific there. And see, you haven't answered my question. Are you able to start a service, or you cannot start it? So let's try to figure out what's the problem exactly. Is it syntax error? Is it logical error? So can you start the service? Also, one thing I recommend, if let's say any of you have tried to configure Samba and things don't work and you're not sure anymore what's going on, that's why I always recommend, before editing this file, to save a backup of the original. If you have not done that, what you can do at this point, you can just use another machine for your Samba server. Every CentOS machine has the Samba package, the way we installed it. And if you switch to another machine, the first thing you should do, save a backup of your file. I'll show how to do it. Just before you edit, let's say you go to a new machine now, and you want to set up a Samba server. First thing you should do, copy, first let's say have a backup directory. If you don't have one already, create a directory called backup under your slash. And then copy your smb.conf file into this backup directory. So this way you have a copy of your original. If later you make many mistakes, you mess up, you're not sure anymore what's going on, no problem. Just delete your existing file in this directory and copy back the backup file into this directory and start all over again. It might be easier to do that than troubleshooting a file in which you have done many errors. Same thing for FTP. I always recommend this. When you have a big configuration file, first back up your original. So I'll open again the Samba file configuration. See, I have not done any other changes in this file. I haven't changed anything in the global settings. I've just added these shares in the end. One folder share and one printer share. You just need to have the right syntax, and you have also to make sure that logically everything is correct here. The path, for example, this is the path for my folder. This is the spool directory in this example for this printer. In my original example, the spool directory was var spool Samba. So any specific questions here, I'll be glad to answer. Anything not clear on the shared definitions, the lines, the syntax? Okay, you're receiving error connection to IP failed. Now, you're receiving this error on which machine? On the server or the client? When does the error happen? when you start the service, when you connect to it from a client machine. All right, so back to my original question. Are you able to start the service on the server? When you go here, I'll show the command. When you go on the server and type, I'll type it here. When you type system control, restart or start SMB. Does this work or not? Do you get any error messages when you do this? I have this on the server. All right, it works on a server. So now, then your problem is not as it is now. I mean, from the info I'm getting here, the problem doesn't seem to be a server problem. It's the connectivity between client and server, something like that. Can you ping from the client? Can you ping the server? Go on the client machine and try to ping the IP of the server. All right, so you can ping. Now, next thing to try. On the server itself, if you do, I'll type it here. I'm on the server, and if I type SMB client, I'll type the IP of the server itself. 250. And which user did I use for Samba last time? Honestly, I remember, but I mean, it was a couple of weeks ago. I think it was user 600. I'll try. Sorry, I'll forget to share them. So let me clear. Okay, let me check while I made it my database of Samba. User 601, I think, is the one I used in my demos. So I'll try to connect. I am on the server itself now. I'll try to connect to the home directory of user 601 using Samba. Does this work? See, try this on a server now. On your server, type this command. Does it work? I mean, for your user, of course, and for your IP. Can you on the server do this and get the connection to work? All right, so if you cannot even do it on the server, then we have a problem with Samba. It is on the server, right? Please confirm. Are you typing the command on the server or on the client? Yes, right, on the server. So you do have a problem with your Samba configuration. At this point, I cannot be sure of what it is. We need to see your configuration file. So maybe the best thing to do is, like I said, start from scratch, either from using a different machine or the same machine, but get a fresh smb.conf file and make sure you type everything right. You don't need to change anything in the first section of the file. I'll open the configuration file again here. So don't touch anything in the first section. Just go to the end of the file and do one part at a time. Let's say only shared folder. In fact, before even you add anything, see, here's what you do. Let's say you take a new machine, right? A new machine as your Samba server. You take the centralized machine that you haven't used yet for Samba. Any of your machines would do. You should be immediately able to start a service. Without even configuring this file, you should be able to start your service. Just add a user to your database, such as user 621, and it should be able right away to connect to your home directory. If this works, it means your Samba service is working. And then editsmb.conf, and then add your sharing sections. All right? So I repeat, if you start from scratch there, without even any configurations, just start your Samba service on a server, and you should be able to connect to the home folder of a user who's part of the database. And from that point on, it's just a matter of configuring smb.conf properly. And to add a user to the database, remember SMB password. SMB password -A, and you are the user of your choice here, so like let's say user 900 whatever, and you type and retype the password. So I'll take any opportunity to mention, I mean, it's based on this question. For FTP, do the same thing. I recommend that first save your file, save a backup copy, because there are so many configuration lines. If sometimes what happens, let me show you something here. Whether it's SAM or FTP, right? Let's talk about FTP now. If I go back to my FTP directory, I'll open any of the configuration files. Let's say when you open it and you're configuring things, see there are so many lines, so many things we're doing here. And then as you go up and down and configure lines there, it may happen to anyone to accidentally mistype something, and you might not even realize it. Okay? And then when you save the file in the end, that thing that you mistyped will be saved. And because of that single character which is wrong somewhere, it will not work. Your service might not even start, or the site script will not start. And then troubleshooting it could be hard because it's a large file. Even if you come back and look at it, you cannot. You never know where you tapped that wrong thing, right? It could be anywhere. That's why it's very useful to have a backup of your original file. So if you feel like you messed up with the file, you don't know anymore what's going on, just get your original back and then start configuring all over again. So just initially copy your file to a backup directory. If you need it later, just recuperate your original file and start over. All right, so the banner message part, sure. I am actually in configuration file here. So here, actually, it's right there. It's somewhere around the middle of the file there towards the end, a little bit towards the end. So FTP_banner. And when you open it the first time, there is a default message. You just change it to whatever you like as a message. So every site normally must have a different banner message. Any other questions? So again, just very quickly here, you see this lecture file I will post today, in fact, has all the items since the beginning of the module. I'm not saying all the details, but all the main ideas. And just to quickly see again, overall, we have done so many protocols: Telnet, SSH, SFTP, SCP, IPv6, DNS, including host file, master slave, and all this stuff about DNS. Then routing, static, default gateway, etc. Then DHCP, all the work around DHCP and routing combined, and also DNS combined. And then Samba and FTP finally. So I think it's lots of material. That's why try to be efficient this afternoon and use your time to do as much practice as you can, because all these things are potentially part of the lab test in the end, in 3 weeks. We have the review session on Saturday, July 10th, but it's only 1 day. Also, this afternoon, if you can, prepare questions, because as you know, on the review day, I cannot repeat all these lectures. I can only answer specific questions. All right, so I'll post this file, today's lecture notes. And if in the next little while, if you have any questions for me, you may ask. Otherwise, you have the rest of the afternoon to the rest of the time in the afternoon to practice.